If there were chariots found in the Red Sea, it would probably have something to do with the crossing of the sea.
We know that this incident occurred in the Red Sea. We can be confident that there is probably some evidence left behind there.
And if this is the site of the crossing, we would expect to find physical remains of the Egyptian army on the seabed.
$10 million vanished into a covert mission nobody was supposed to know about. Ex-military divers, military-grade sonar, coordinates left by a man the entire scientific world had dismissed as a fraud. Late 2024, they descended into the Red Sea and found something that should have stopped the world. An entire Egyptian army lying on the seafloor, frozen in time. Hundreds of chariot wheels with the exact spoke patterns used by Pharaoh's elite forces. Horse skeletons still positioned as if they were harnessed when they died. Human bones tangled in the wreckage, and deep beneath the coral, the unmistakable glint of gold. This wasn't a shipwreck. This was a catastrophe, the kind of discovery that rewrites history books. But here's what nobody's talking about. When the findings were quietly shared with the world's top Egyptologists, they didn't celebrate, they didn't debate, they went completely silent. And when the team compared their high-definition sonar maps to documentation from 40 years ago, they saw something that made their blood run cold. Large sections of the debris field were gone, not eroded, gone, with drag marks on the seafloor where heavy objects had been pulled away. The evidence is vanishing, and someone doesn't want you to know what's down there. Here's what you need to understand about this expedition. This was not some university-funded research project that would end up buried in an academic journal nobody reads. This was a covert operation, privately funded to the tune of over $10 million by backers whose names have never been released. The team assembled for this mission included elite deep-sea divers, many of them former military, underwater archaeologists who had grown frustrated with the politics of their field, engineers operating technology that most research teams can only dream of accessing. We're talking about advanced side-scan sonar, capable of mapping the seafloor in extraordinary detail. Military-grade remotely operated vehicles fitted with high-definition cameras that could capture footage in the crushing darkness hundreds of feet below the surface. Hypersensitive magnetometers designed to detect metal beneath layers of sand and coral. This was not amateur hour. This was a surgical strike on a mystery that has haunted certain researchers for over 40 years. They began their search in the Gulf of Aqaba, that narrow finger of the Red Sea that separates the Sinai Peninsula from Saudi Arabia.
And all these finds are spread out on a large area on the coasts of Saudi Arabia and Egypt.
For days, the sonar pulsed into the deep, scanning grid after grid of the seafloor. And then the operator saw something that made him call everyone to the screen. Strange symmetrical anomalies, shapes that were not natural rock formations. They were round, they were precise, and most disturbingly, they were arranged in a long, linear trail stretching across the seafloor. The shapes looked exactly like wheels, hundreds of them. They deployed the ROV, sending that robotic eye down into water so dark and cold that human divers could only stay for minutes at a time. The submarine's lights cut through the gloom. At first, there was nothing but sand and stone. Then, emerging from the sediment like a ghost, they saw it. A perfectly round shape, completely encrusted in coral. It was unmistakably a wheel, an ancient spoked chariot wheel. As the ROV glided forward, another came into view, then another. The debris field stretched for nearly 1.5 miles. This was not a single accident. This was a catastrophe. The divers had to go down themselves. What they saw when they reached the bottom has been described by members of the team as overwhelming, even terrifying. They were swimming through a war zone, frozen in time.
I mean, about that long, standing us in front of me, we cannot communicate in a way.
The seafloor was littered with the remains of what appeared to be a fleeing or perhaps charging army. They documented wheels with 4 spokes, 6 spokes, and 8 spokes. This detail matters enormously because these specific designs match exactly the different types of chariots used by the Egyptian military during the New Kingdom period. The 4-spoke wheels were older models. The 6- and 8-spoke designs were the advanced, high-tech stable platforms used by elite warriors and royalty. Finding all of them jumbled together in one place was like discovering a snapshot of the entire Egyptian chariot corps destroyed in a single moment. But it wasn't just wheels. They found twisted metal fragments that appeared to be axles. They found what looked like the rectangular remains of chariot cabs, now just piles of corroded bronze and petrified wood fused to the seafloor by centuries of relentless coral growth. And then they found the bones. Tangled within the chariot debris were bone shards, hundreds of them. Some were clearly animals, the skulls and ribs and leg bones of horses positioned exactly where they would be if the animals were still harnessed to the chariots when they died. But others were unmistakably human. Spinal columns, pelvic bones, fragments of skulls, all mixed together in a chaotic, terrible jumble that spoke of sudden, violent death. One of the divers, sweeping a high-powered light over a mound of coral, caught something that made the entire team stop. A faint, unnatural glimmer beneath the crust. Something was shining down there. A dull, unmistakable, golden sheen. This matched the most incredible and most dismissed claim that had ever been made about this site.
For them, I think it's unfortunate sensationalism.
That among the army's wreckage lay a single, gold-plated chariot wheel, perhaps belonging to a high-ranking general or even the Pharaoh himself. They couldn't touch it. The coral had locked it in place like natural concrete, and any attempt to remove it would destroy it. But they documented everything. Thousands of high-resolution photographs, hours of high-definition video. They knew what they had found would either change the world or be buried forever. But here's the thing. The discovery was just the first piece. Because the location, the specific geography of this site, is perhaps even more stunning than what lies on the seafloor. The Gulf of Aqaba is known for being extraordinarily deep in most places. We're talking about a massive underwater canyon that plunges down 5,000, even 6,000 feet. That's over a mile straight down. A sheer cliff of dark water. Trying to cross it would be completely impossible for any army, ancient or modern, except for one place. Right where the divers found the debris field, there is a massive flat land bridge that spans the entire Gulf.
This is about 5 miles wide here. The area is about 8 square miles.
It's an underwater plateau, stretching nearly 10 miles from a large beach on the Egyptian side called Nuweiba to the shores of Saudi Arabia. On either side of this bridge, the seabed drops dramatically into those mile-deep abysses. But the bridge itself is relatively shallow, around 900 feet at its deepest point. Compared to the canyons flanking it, this is a raised pathway cutting through impossible terrain. The sonar maps show it clearly. A distinct, massive underwater road, 10 miles long and several miles wide. This is the only place in the entire 100-mile length of the Gulf of Aqaba where an ancient group of people could have even attempted a crossing. And here's where it becomes extraordinary. The beach at Nuweiba, where this underwater bridge begins, is a massive sprawling shore completely walled in on either side by steep, impassable mountains. The only way in is from the west. The only way out is forward into the sea. This geography is a one-to-one match for an ancient account that describes a group of fleeing people trapped against the water, with mountains hemming them in and an army closing in from behind. And this geographical feature, this underwater bridge, is something ancient writers could not possibly have known about. You cannot see it from the surface. You can only find it with advanced sonar technology that did not exist until the modern era. Yet the story they told points directly to this singular location. The linear distribution of the artifacts follows the path of this submerged bridge exactly. The mile-and-a-half trail of wheels and bones looks like a group that was caught in the middle of the crossing. The 900-foot depth protected these artifacts from storms, ship anchors, and looters for millennia. The unique currents created by the deep canyons on either side trapped silt and sediment on the plateau, slowly burying the wreckage. The warm, clear water was perfect for coral growth, and the coral acted like natural concrete, growing over the hard surfaces of wood and bronze and metal.
Are claiming that there are coral-encrusted chariot wheels on the bottom of the Red Sea.
Over thousands of years, the organic material rotted away, but the coral held its shape. The divers weren't just finding wheels, they were finding wheel-shaped fossils. Without this specific combination of geography and biology, any remains would have scattered and dissolved into nothing centuries ago. This land bridge also explains the scale of destruction. An entire army with hundreds of chariots, horses, and soldiers funneled into this narrow 10-mile bottleneck would be completely vulnerable. When disaster struck, there was no escape. They couldn't go left into the abyss. They couldn't go right into the abyss. They were trapped on a corridor that became a killing floor. But here's where the story gets even stranger. This entire discovery, the secret expedition, the coordinates, the specific location of the debris field, all of it traces back to one man. And for decades, the academic world treated him like a joke. Ron Wyatt wasn't a professor. He wasn't affiliated with any prestigious institution. He was a nurse anesthetist from Tennessee, a self-taught biblical adventurer who spent his own money chasing claims that mainstream archaeology had already dismissed as fantasy. He was the definition of an outsider. In the 1970s, Wyatt became obsessed with finding the true location of the Red Sea crossing. He rejected the conventional theories about shallow, marshy lakes in northern Egypt. He followed textual clues that he believed pointed to a massive body of water deep enough to drown an entire army. His search led him to the Gulf of Aqaba, to that mountain-locked beach at Nuweiba, and to the underwater land bridge. He reasoned that if this was where the crossing happened, then the remains of the destroyed army must still be down there. So in 1978, armed with basic scuba gear, a small boat, and conviction that bordered on obsession, he did something no one else had bothered to do. He went down and looked. What he claimed to find was exactly what the 2024 expedition verified with their $10 million of advanced technology. He reported coral-encrusted chariot wheels. He claimed to have recovered a hub from one. He took photographs that were blurry and grainy and easy to dismiss. On later dives, he reported human bones and horse bones mixed with chariot parts. And he made his most explosive claim of all, that he had found and filmed a golden chariot wheel gleaming faintly beneath the coral. When Wyatt presented his findings, the academic world didn't just ignore him, they destroyed him. He was labeled a fraud, a pseudoscience peddler, a religious fanatic, seeing what he wanted to see. His other claims made him an even easier target. He also said he had found Noah's Ark. He claimed the true location of Mount Sinai was in Saudi Arabia, directly across from Nuweiba. He said he had located the Ark of the Covenant in a cave beneath Jerusalem. To mainstream science, this wasn't research. It was a fantasy-fueled treasure hunt conducted by someone with no credentials and too much faith. Ron Wyatt died in 1999. His claims still universally mocked. But he left something behind: his research, his maps, the exact coordinates of everything he had found. The 2024 expedition wasn't diving blind. They were following the map of the man everyone had called a fool, and their advanced technology verified, one by one, the impossible things the nurse from Tennessee had been saying all along. The sonar confirmed the land bridge exactly where he said it would be. The cameras confirmed the wheels, the 4-spoke and 6-spoke and 8-spoke designs, just as he had described. The divers confirmed the bones. They even saw the glint of gold that Wyatt had reported 40 years earlier. The experts who spent decades dismissing him are now confronted with high-definition evidence that he was right, and they have nothing to say. But that raises the biggest question of all. If there's an army at the bottom of the sea, how did it get there? The ancient account says, the waters parted, a path was created on dry ground, and when the pursuing army followed, the waters collapsed and drowned them all.
At daybreak, the sea went back to its place.
Mainstream science says that's impossible, but the evidence is sitting on the sea floor. Something happened in that gulf, something catastrophic. One theory points to a volcano. Around 3,500 years ago, a massive volcanic eruption occurred on the Greek island of Thera, modern-day Santorini. This was one of the largest eruptions in human history, a planet-altering event. An eruption of this magnitude, hundreds of miles away, would have generated a massive tsunami that radiated across the Mediterranean and interconnected bodies of water. What most people don't realize about tsunamis is the drawback effect. Before the giant wave hits, the sea recedes. The water is pulled back dramatically, sometimes for miles, exposing the sea floor. To anyone who had never witnessed this phenomenon, it would look like the sea itself was parting. The theory runs like this. The fleeing group is trapped at Nuweiba. The Thera eruption triggers a tidal drawback in the Red Sea. The water pulls back, exposing the 10-mile land bridge. They run across. The pursuing army, seeing their quarry escaping, charges onto the exposed muddy sea floor.
And so the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea on the dry ground.
But the drawback is only the first act. The second is the wave returning. Just as the army, weighed down by heavy chariots, reaches the middle of the gulf, the tsunami hits. A wall of water roars back in, annihilating everything in its path in an instant. The timing, the parting, the collapse of water walls. It fits the ancient description almost perfectly. Other theories venture into stranger territory. Some propose that what the fleeing group carried with them was not merely a religious artifact, but a piece of advanced technology, an energy source or weapon that was stolen from Egypt. The pursuit wasn't about recapturing escaped laborers. It was about recovering something of immense power. When they were trapped at the sea, this device was activated, creating the dry passage through some unknown force. Once the army was committed to the crossing, the device was deactivated and the waters collapsed. This explains why the Pharaoh would risk his entire elite fighting force in a reckless charge. He wasn't merely chasing people, he was chasing something irreplaceable. Whatever the mechanism, natural or otherwise, the evidence on the seafloor tells a consistent story. Something happened in that narrow corridor. Something sudden, something violent, something that killed hundreds, possibly thousands, in a single catastrophic moment and left their remains to be fossilized in coral for 3.5 millennia. But if the proof is there, sitting at the bottom of the Red Sea, documented with high-definition cameras and advanced sonar, why aren't we hearing about it? Why the silence? Now, we arrive at the question that haunts this entire story. Why are the experts silent? The world's leading Egyptologists, the academics who have spent their careers studying ancient Egypt, have said almost nothing about these findings. The discovery was quietly shared with certain institutions, and the response was not excitement or curiosity. It was a wall of silence. Here's what you need to understand about the academic position on this matter. For over 100 years, the consensus among secular Egyptologists has been absolute. The mass exodus described in ancient texts did not happen, at least not on the scale the story claims. This is taught in every major university. It's written in every textbook. It's the established dogma of the field. Scholars point out correctly that there is no archaeological evidence in the Sinai Desert for a massive population wandering for decades. Where are the campsites? Where are the mass graves? Where is the pottery? They point out correctly that there is no mention in any Egyptian record, no hieroglyphs, no papyrus of their most valuable military asset being destroyed in a single catastrophic day. The entire framework of modern Egyptology, its timelines, its king lists, its understanding of the power of the new kingdom, is built on a foundation that does not include this event. It cannot include this event. To the academic establishment, the story is a powerful cultural myth, but a myth nonetheless. And now, a team of divers, following the map of a man every serious scholar had dismissed as a crank, has found a massive underwater debris field that matches the ancient account with disturbing precision. This is not one or two ambiguous artifacts. This is hundreds of chariots, wheels with spoke patterns specific to the Egyptian military of the 18th dynasty, the exact right time period, at the exact right location, on the only natural crossing in the entire Gulf. If this site is authentic, then the experts were wrong. Not slightly wrong, catastrophically wrong. A professor who has built a 30-year career on the position that this event is a myth cannot suddenly reverse course. Their reputation would be destroyed. Their publications would become fiction. Every student they mentored would have been taught something false. The institutional pressure to remain silent, to dismiss, to attack the source, rather than engage with the evidence, is overwhelming. But there's a darker possibility that some researchers have whispered about. What if the silence goes beyond academic self-preservation? This discovery, if proven beyond doubt, would provide physical, tangible evidence for one of the foundational events described in the texts sacred to Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. In a world already fractured by religious and political tension, what would that mean? It would elevate one religious tradition with archaeological proof above all others. It would validate claims that billions of people hold sacred and that billions of others reject. It would be not just academically disruptive, but geopolitically explosive. And here's where the story gets truly disturbing. The evidence is disappearing, not slowly eroding over centuries the way underwater artifacts naturally decay, disappearing in ways that suggest deliberate, methodical removal. Remember the golden chariot wheel that Wyatt claimed to have found back in the late 1970s? According to his account, he located a 4-spoke wheel plated in gold, the kind of ceremonial vehicle that would have belonged only to the highest Egyptian royalty possibly the Pharaoh himself. He said he brought it to the surface. He documented it. He photographed it. And then, believing he was doing the right thing, he reported its existence to Egyptian authorities, fully expecting they would be thrilled at such an extraordinary discovery. What happened next should trouble anyone who cares about historical truth. The wheel vanished. There are no official photographs in any archive. There is no museum record anywhere in Egypt or beyond. There is no government statement acknowledging that such an artifact was ever recovered, ever examined, ever existed at all. The single most important piece of physical evidence, the one object that could have verified everything Wyatt claimed, simply ceased to exist the moment it left his hands. Skeptics point to this disappearance as proof that Wyatt fabricated the entire story. No wheel, no evidence, no credibility. Case closed. But consider the alternative possibility, the one that's far more unsettling. What if the wheel was real? What if it was confiscated precisely because of what it proved? What if it now sits in some government vault, some private collection, some place where it will never be subjected to scientific analysis or public scrutiny? Artifacts of profound historical significance have disappeared before, when they threatened powerful interests. Why would this be any different? But the Golden Wheel is not the only thing that seems to have vanished. The 2024 expedition came equipped with sonar technology far superior to anything available in Wyatt's era. They created detailed maps of the debris field and then did something crucial. They compared their new scans to the original documentation Wyatt left behind from the 1970s and 1980s. What they found was deeply troubling. Large sections of the site that Wyatt had marked as dense with artifacts, areas where he documented concentrations of chariot parts and skeletal remains, are now suspiciously empty. The debris that should be there, according to his records, is simply gone. Natural erosion cannot explain this. The site has remained stable for thousands of years, protected by its depth and the unique current patterns created by the surrounding underwater canyons. What the team reported seeing instead were drag marks on the seafloor, long linear scars in the sediment that look exactly like what you would expect if heavy objects were hooked by cables and pulled away. This is not the random scattering of ocean currents. This looks surgical. This looks intentional. This looks like a cleanup operation conducted over decades by someone with the resources, the access, and the motivation to erase an inconvenient truth from the bottom of the sea before the world ever gets a chance to see it. The footage is real, the location is precise, and the silence surrounding it is anything but accidental. Because what lies beneath the Red Sea may challenge far more than a single archaeological claim. It may challenge who controls history itself. When evidence disappears and the people best positioned to explain it choose not to speak, the truth doesn't vanish. It waits, buried beneath layers of politics, reputation, and fear. This story is not over. It's only been submerged. And as the trail grows colder and the questions grow sharper, one unsettling thought remains. If something this significant can be hidden in plain sight, what else has been buried with it? And who decides when we're finally allowed to know?